I want to bring on, next up, Ayush, to talk about what's happening in the world of DePIN. I think that's the first time I've said it out loud. It is a new amazing category. I'll have you plug in. But we're going to talk about what Huddle is and how all of it actually works. We're kind of finally at a point where we're offering services that are actually one-to-one with big infrastructure that you already are aware of, such as Zoom or Google Meets, and being able to get the same performance guarantees is actually pretty impressive. So we're going to get a quick demo on how Huddle works and what it is and how you can actually be part of understanding what's happening in the world of DePIN. So please welcome Ayush on stage.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, and thanks, Karthik. I just want to give a quick story before I start off what Huddle 01 is. So we started off in ETHGlobal HackFest back in 2020. This was when I and my co-founder Sushmita is sitting here as well. We came and we were just discussing on what we should be building, and that's where we saw this whole saga of Zoom bombings happening, and we realized that all of these real-time communication technologies are built on something called as WebRTC, which is Web Real-Time Communication Protocol. And that's where we realized that why there's such a privacy issue in things like Zoom is because of how the internet infrastructure is built. So I think first of all, I want to just thank Karthik and the whole ETHGlobal team for giving us a stage back in 2020. Because of that, now we're a team of 28 people, raised 5 million, have built the app, the infrastructure, and the network. And I think the work which they are doing is fantastic. And I think I'm really excited about the ETHGlobal New York as well. Yeah, moving on. So what we are, so Huddle 01 is a people-powered communication network. We have a three-pronged approach: an app which looks like Google Meet or Zoom, but doesn't use centralized infrastructure, where you can do a call in a peer-to-peer fashion, but that's not it. We have crypto primitives, where you can use NFT as an avatar, you can do token-gated meetings, you can record your calls and store it over Filecoin and IPFS in a persistent manner. There are people from Lighthouse team as well. You can store it over Lighthouse and make it much more encrypted in nature. And a lot of people who prefer to have a pseudonymity, want to use NFT as an avatar and want to do a kind of pseudonymous meeting, they use Huddle 01's app. But that's where we start. The second is an SDK. That means anyone who wants to integrate audio and video into their own products, they in less than 5 minutes, they use our SDKs. Very easy to use, takes 5 minutes, and you can integrate into it in a completely non-Google OAuth authenticated manner. A lot of these big apps in the ecosystem of Lens powers via Huddle 01's SDK. And the third is the end game of Huddle 01, which is the network which we are trying to build. That means if let's suppose 5 or 6 of us here are doing a call, instead of relying on a centralized server, you become a node and you power the call of us. So I take the compute and bandwidth from your own laptop and you can power the call. So it's a people-powered communication network itself. Now, why am I here? And why is the DePIN important? And what is this decentralized physical infrastructure networks? So DePIN is basically something which we use where you don't require traditional infrastructure costings to build a new network from bottom up in a lot of high cost manner. It's much more cheaper, it's much more faster to build, and crypto economic incentives help it bootstrap really fast. And now I'm going to talk about why Huddle 01 is an important part and why WebRTC, the protocol which we talked about, is a very crucial part of this whole DePIN spin and DePIN narrative. This is a very good sector map which has been created by Messari and Variant. We've taken inspiration from that and we've added a couple of layers of WebRTC network where Huddle 01 fits in. But you would know from here that for the storage perspective, Filecoin has been doing some tremendous work. In terms of CDNs, there is Theta, there is Fleek. In terms of VPN, there are a couple of others. But these are just the cloud-based networks. There are other networks because of US. I think one thing which, before the previous talk we talked about was the regulations part. I think one good thing about in US is that the spectrum is completely open. That means you can use that spectrum, and that's why there is such a good innovation happening in the space of 5G technology, with Helium doing some fantastic work, Carrier one, where now in Florida you are getting $5 in which you can get your own, where the AT&T charges $80. So I think those differences gets created because now you're able to create this people-powered networks in general, and this is happening in all the different categories from cloud and server networks to wireless networks, to sensor networks, and to other energy kind of networks as well. I think that's where Hivemapper and all the others also play very, very important role, where now you don't have to rely on Google Maps. You can just use a dash cam yourself, and you can just go through and driveway, and you earn things like honey tokens for that. Now, these are fantastic ways in real world where you can use this crypto economic incentives and bootstrap the supply side really fast while also building the demand side. This is the next slide. This is by variant as well. Very specific focus where they talk about all these different kind of categories where very interesting things are happening. And that's where something like LivePeer is doing interesting work on transcoding. And that's where we just mentioned Huddle One's WebRTC network and why it becomes important as a part of DePIN. Why real-time communication, which we are doing right now with a latency of less than 100 milliseconds, becomes extremely, extremely important to make sure that the costing goes down, our communication, our collaboration, our innovation kind of philosophies improves, and we are able to coordinate at a mass level. Now, this has been the WebRTC market for the last, since 2017. It's been increasing at a CAGR of 48%, is more than $100 billion of market. But if you see about it in terms of who is capturing that market, so this is a report from 2015 by TechCrunch, where it was that WebRTC race has begun today. Now, in this race, there are 3 or more players who have actually captured the market completely. It's Twilio, it's Vonage, it's Agora. Now, just in between these 3, they are doing, their earnings report is more than $2 billion, which they earned just from this real-time communication using WebRTC in general. Now, the problem is that these are overtly centralized. Your data is not content encrypted, it's just transport encrypted. That means your data could still be seen. And if we know about all these things which happen, I think we started Huddle One back when Zoom had a Zoom bombings issue, but there was more issues which happen right now is regarding the AI, where they're training your data on top of whatever you're speaking. Now, these things create a kind of problem. It's not just a problem on the client level, it's a problem on the underneath infrastructure and the incentive problem which is there with these server-based networks. Now, these are some of the quarterly earning report of all these bigger level Twilio, which is more than $1 billion here. Now, the problems in the current RTC space is very simple. If I and you are doing a call right now in New York, our calls are still routed through a central server which is based in the server farms like North Virginia, and then it comes back. The problems with this approach is that when we do an audio and video calls, you need to have a latency of less than 100 milliseconds. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like an real-time communication. So think about it right now. We don't see that in places where the technology or the latency or the bandwidth has been better, but in places where the bandwidth is supremely low, in places in Africa, in places in India, in places where you are in a very tier 3 city, and the problem is so huge that you are not able to do a proper call, a Zoom call or a Google Meet call or any of the other platforms. So instead of making that your audio and video routes through a central server via North Virginia and then comes back, it leads to a lot of latency, jitter, buffer, robotic voices and whatnot. And that's where we need to make sure that we have to build something where if we are doing a call in New York itself, why not the other person becomes a node and they power the call itself? And that's what Huddle 01 is working towards, building a people-powered communication network. This is a very dear story to mine, and this is one of the reasons why which led me and Sushmit also to discuss into detail about why it's important to start. So this is my cousin. It's a real story. It's a cousin. He's in 4th standard. It was 2020. He's in a tier 3 city in India, and he didn't have a great internet connection. It was COVID, and all the schools were closed, and he had to do a Zoom call. Now, while doing Zoom call, he had to use Zoom in tandem with WhatsApp because the latency was so high, he was not able to ask. He was not able to understand what the teacher was saying. So he has to ask his peers that, hey, what did the teacher just say? Because the latency was so high. Now imagine compounding that for 3 years, what kind of rote learning used to happen. Now this is the problem because he was in Bihar, which is in tier 3 city, and all his audio video packets, which was coming from such a low bandwidth, was going all the way to North Virginia and then coming back. Now that led to such a latency, jitter, buffer and robotic voices that he was not able to do a proper call, leading to a kind of rote learning experience for a large time. And that's where we come in. We are building the future of RTC with a DePIN paradigm. All of us have a great internet connection right now. We have a great laptop, an 8-core CPU laptop, and we make sure that rather than relying on a centralized server, you become a node and you power the call itself. So you become the server and you are able to do that, specifically built for the routing purpose. And that's what we have been building, where token helps in basically incentivizing that whole thing. Very interestingly, we haven't gone towards the supply side first. We built the demand side first, and I'll let you know why we did the demand side first approach rather than just building the supply and making sure that all of us become node on day one. We have been live for the last 3 years, but that's the approach which we took. These are things which happens. There's no incentive for you to do an AI over your data. It's completely encrypted. It follows the proper cascaded consensus mechanism. That means it's completely, you make sure that you are running the nodes where the lowest, where the highest density is. So we're also using all these interesting paradigms which Uber also uses of surge pricing, where there's a maximum surge, there is more demand, and you make sure that you give more incentives to people who are running nodes there because you're getting more demand to do these real-time communication meetings. This is something which my co-founder Sushmit is sitting there. He coined it. It's called unlocking RTC economy, where we make sure that how the crypto economic incentives will work like. So we started off by building the product first. The product is live. Then we started off building an SDK, which is now being powered in all the other different kind of Web3 social apps who requires an audio and video into their own products in less than 5 minutes. So rather than relying on Agora or something like RingCentral or something like Vonage or Twilio, you use Huddle 1, which is built with Web3 primitives, which is built with the philosophy of free speech, and you are able to have a proper communication with a better latency, with a better audio video quality, and much more. Now, what I mentioned about that we built the demand side first and then the supply side. What it means is that if you can download the app, it's on App Store. We have done more than 1 million minutes of meeting on the platform. It's used by a lot of people who prefer pseudonymity, people who prefer privacy, people who prefer Web3, the openness, the free speech in general. And that's how we are getting a lot of demand on the app layer. Then we wrapped up the app into an SDK and made sure we gave it to all the people who needed it, not only in the Web3 world, but also in the Web2 world as well. So these are all the people who use it. It's a mixed bag of Web3 as well as Web2 customers. So we are not going after just the beachhead of Web3, but also going after the Web2 based market, because what they need is an economical pricing, which we can give it to them. Why? Because of the whole way in which we have created this demand and supply marketplace. So this is where we are at right now. And what I'll do right now after this is that I'll just show you Huddle 01's node demo on how you can run a node on your own laptop. It's very simple. It's a 1.5 minute video by our protocol lead Vaibhav, who has recorded this video just in the morning, like 4 a.m. in the morning for us to see. It's a 1.5 minute video which talks about how easy it is to just do an NPM module and just run the node and in your own laptop. And there's an economical gating on top of it, where you can make sure that no rogue node becomes a rogue in nature. And as you can know that this is one of the alphas, is that you will be able to run the node in your own laptop, all of us, by Q1 of 2024. This we are making sure that we work better than the current server-based networks which are out there, to make sure that over time we can give it to even people like Zoom to not rely on something like an AWS server, but use this alternate edge-based network which we are creating. So just a small video and then I'll just wrap it up. So basically you're just installing the node, which is an SFU, a selective forward unit. As you go forward into it, you will be able to, it takes around 5 seconds to do this. Once you're able to do that, now this is internal right now. This is not for the public, but we want a lot of feedbacks. Anyone who's interested, would love to give it to you and get some design-based decisions based on that. So that how can we make it easy? We just don't want to do it via console. We want it's easy for a person to just click on a browser and make sure that they're able to do it. Now, as you go here, you'll be able to see that now you're staking here. Why? Because you're doing an economical gating so that no one else can become a node. No one else can basically join the call who is rogue in nature. And that's why we have done this economical gating in Huddle 01. Now, here is a CID. Now you just have to make sure that any of the people just click on the link, and now you'll be able to run the node. Now you'll be seeing my protocol lead Vaibhav is saying hi. Yeah, so he's joined the call, and That's it. He's web app, and now he'll be sending this link to the other person. And these are not dependent on the AWS servers. It's something which you run by yourself. Right now, we are beta testing between both running it on your own laptop while running it also on cloud to make sure how the latency comes into picture. Now this is it. The call has been established. You're doing a call, and we are able to do this call in an end-to-end fashion in more than 500 people. So that's where we are right now. Yeah, I think that's majorly about it. This is how you end the node. But yeah, I think that's the whole picture of Huddle One in terms of WebRTC and democratizing this whole WebRTC network. And I'm really bullish on the whole DePIN space because of all these different kind of categories which has been created from DriveIn or from Hype Mapper or from Helium. And I was a part of DePIN Summit recently, and I saw the way it is moving forward. And I'm seeing that more happening in US than Asia. So one of the reasons why I'm bullish on the US point of view is because of how much work is being done at a very bottom layer to just make sure that the real world assets becomes much more democratized, much more faster, and becomes people powered. Thank you so much.